get into this conversation now. The State Security Agency is proposing new legislation regulating the establishment of non-governmental or faith-based organizations. If passed into law, the new regulations will give power to the agency to conduct security clearance on individuals setting up the entities. Now, the State Security Agency believes that this will also assist with curbing the illicit financial flows in the country. Heidi Swart is with the organization Intelwatch, and she joins us now to give us her perspective of what is being proposed here. Heidi, good morning to you, and thank you very much for your time. Just want to repeat the line here in that introduction. If passed into law, the new regulations will give power to the agency to conduct security clearance on individuals who intend setting up these entities. What could be problematic about this?
Hi, good morning. Thanks for letting me on the show. Yes, so security vetting, first off, is a very invasive process with a very specific purpose. It gives the State Security Agency the right to look at any personal information which they deem relevant for their vetting investigation. This would include your banking records, your perhaps your criminal record if you have one, financial records, etc. So they basically look at everything about you, and it can even include interception of your communications. All of that is legal. The reason why they have this legal capability is to make sure that persons who work in the government, who work with sensitive classified information or who has access to sensitive state locations or systems can be relied upon. So they look at the person's character, their financial status, etc., and if they conclude that you are a risk, so for instance, perhaps you can be bribed, or perhaps you will be irresponsible with the work that you're doing and with the information that you have access to, then they don't grant you security clearance, and from there on you're going to have trouble doing the job. So essentially, they want to apply this process to people who they think require security clearance and want to start a non-profit organization or a faith-based organization.
Yeah.
So that's the long and the short of it, and it's actually quite bizarre.
Right.
It's not really done like that in democracies.
So here's what I want to ask of you, because you have penned an opinion piece, or what we would call a think piece, in the Daily Maverick. And your headline was quite catchy in that you are saying this is the perfect ruse for a state security clampdown on NGOs and churches. Why would government want to do that? Right.
So let's first talk about the State Security Agency's history, or reported history with non-governmental organizations. So during the Zondo Commission, it emerged that there was a infiltration and surveillance conducted on non-profit organizations, as well as trade unions and the Fees Must Fall movement, basically anybody deemed hostile to the powers that be. So that is not really a legitimate reason to be trying to sabotage civil society groups that really are just trying to do their job. We also know that organizations are classified as a security threat, can be classified as a security threat, based on very, very little, almost want to say, very few requirements. So, for instance, Greenpeace Greenpeace Africa was viewed as a security threat and subjected to surveillance because 20 years ago, Greenpeace International had taken action against Japanese whaling ships, rammed into one of the ships, and also about 20 years ago, some Greenpeace Africa folks climbed onto the walls and hung a banner of the Kuba nuclear station. So there are many, many reasons to classify non-profits as threats. But I mean, arguably, those are not good enough reasons. And the speculation is, of course, that the government did not want interference with the nuclear deal that was being discussed at the time, and Greenpeace was very vocal. So we have that history, that recorded history, and so that wouldn't be a legitimate operation. So that would be, if vetting did give them a chance to do that, they'd basically be able to surveil and even sabotage organizations, and they'd be able to do it behind a veil of secrecy, because they basically are able to classify their activities and not account for what they're doing.
So before you move on, Heidi, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Before you move on from this history, I just want to add perhaps a bit of flavor to it and bring it to what we at least have been reading recently. One minister stands out in President Ramaphosa's cabinet who appears to have a problem with NGOs. I'm not sure whether the climate activists would qualify as that, but I think if you talk about Greenpeace, it's one and the same. But he appears to have a particular problem with environmentalists whom he says are standing in the way of development, particularly in the energy space, given the constraints of our country when it comes to electricity provision. Does it not have a point as to who is funding these people? Because I view them as standing in the way of development in this country.
Look, I think what we need to remember is that they have a constitutional right to protest. That's the bottom line. Whether they're funded by outside influences, which Mr. Matashe maintains, are trying to sabotage us or not, I think, that is something that he would have to prove. And he has thus far not really brought any proof. And there's no real difference between, let's say, the environmentalist causes here and all across the world. People are genuinely concerned about the planet. And I think to call them sort of CIA inspired, apart from it not being really based on any facts, it's to be frank, it's quite ludicrous. We know that the CIA has a terrible history, but we also know that these people are fighting for legitimate causes and for the future of our kids.
But here's the point, exactly what you've just said. We know about the CIA and its history in many countries in the world. So is it not fair for government, though, to at least be in the know? Who is funded by the CIA for what intentions in South Africa? Is that not, are we not supposed to be curious about that?
Look, let me just quickly get back to the ruse part. The government hasn't explicitly said that they want to find out who's being funded by the CIA, right? So what they've said is that they've created these laws, or they're proposing these laws because they want to curb terror finance, right? And the reason why they want to do this is they want to have South Africa removed from an international grey list that's been set up by the International Monetary Fund, and that has basically been, what it basically means is that our anti-terrorism and anti-money laundering laws and the implementation simply is not up to scratch. So South Africa's been working hard to get, to get on par with international standards, and they've done a good job.
Yeah.
One of the aspects that we have to address, or that we had to address, was non-profit organization regulation, to make sure that these organizations do not get abused to fund terrorism and money laundering. Right, so they have held this up as an excuse to do this vetting. And the problem with that is that there have already been laws have already been implemented last year in December, and it's been enacted already to curb terror finance and money laundering through churches, mosques, and non-profit organizations. And powers have been granted to the Financial Intelligence Center, as well as to the Hawks, to improve investigations of these organizations. So, in other words, they have the power to really scrutinize the finances of these organizations, whether they are committing money laundering or whether they are, perhaps, even being driven by outside forces. There are already laws allowing this.
Yeah.
Now, these laws are investigations, right? You have a crime, a suspected crime, you open a case, you have a number, and case number, and you investigate it. There's the judicial systems involved. So now the SSA actually wants to bypass all of that and say, no, we will just vet organizations, right? And that basically puts the organization under surveillance, and it allows you then to sabotage or, even force people out of jobs at non-profit organizations.
Sure.
So that's the one aspect of it. So their main reason for putting this forward is not because they want to, sniff out the CIA funding. I don't think that is really that isn't their official reason.
Yeah.
So that's why I said in the headline this is a ruse. Now, back to your question to the CIA funding organizations, one has to ask yourself, again, look at America. The oil companies are thriving. I mean, they're thriving, especially now with the war in Ukraine. The CIA is not known to do things that will sabotage the US economy. So there would be no reason for the CIA to step in here and spoil the whole oil and coal scene. That's just not their game. They have one purpose, and that is to look out for the United States and the United States economy. And you can look at their interference in countries. You can look throughout Africa. You can look throughout the Middle East. I mean, it's really about the oil, and it's really about, the fossil fuels. So yes, to say that the American, the CIA, want to, through the environmental organizations, sabotage our fossil fuel industry is just ludicrous. It makes absolutely no sense. It's not something that the CIA would do. I mean, Total just got, if I remember correctly, a French company. They just got a drilling the go-ahead to go and do prospecting off the coast here in South Africa.
All right.
I mean, that's France and America, and the United States and France are pretty tight. They're not going to mess with each other's, oil interests.
Okay. All right. Heidi, let's leave the conversation there. Heidi Swart is from the organization Intelwatch. Thanks indeed for your analysis of this proposed law. Thanks indeed for your time.